So Jizo, sometimes he is used as a response to events where there's a lot of lives lost or a lot of tragedy involved with it. And the photographer of the image on the left here is actually in the audience here today, and I would like to invite him to come up for 3 to 5 minutes to talk about the role of Jizo in response to the bombs that dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So Richard, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Michael. This is known as Jizo Son, S-O-N. It's located about 200 meters away from the hypocenter where the atomic bomb was dropped. The atomic bomb blew up above Hiroshima about 1,800 feet for maximum destruction. And this Jizo, it must be about a meter in height. When I tried to photograph it earlier during the day, the location has no cross light. So I went that evening, I was there and held my cell phone over here and my camera here and shot at 1/15th of a second holding my breath. But anyway, at the bottom of this Jizo, it's sitting on like a lotus. My group is called Shadows for Peace. The shadows refers to the shadow patterns of those that died from the atomic bomb, that were vaporized, and all they found was their shadow patterns because the temperature was about 10,000 degrees at the hypocenter. And this somehow survived. It was close to the hypocenter. So around the base, you see a shadow pattern. So I don't think it was obviously not totally exposed to the bomb. Where there are other Jizos and there are other Buddhas, their faces are blown off. Some of them you can't even see their face. The faces are broken. But this must have been in some kind of shelter. But then because of the intensity of the heat, the base has the shadow. There is a little destruction on the face and also on the sides of this Jizo. Throughout my travels through Nagasaki, I go to Nagasaki a lot, and there are a lot of Jizos along the hillside where the bomb exploded, and there was one that I photographed, and I used it in one of my images called Faceless, Faceless Victims. And whether it was burned off, I don't know. It could have just been made that way without a face. But anyway, there are the red cap and the red bibs on a lot of, not just Jizos, but many of the sculptures. It's for protection and protecting especially children. And I'll tell you a gruesome story. In Hiroshima, there is, in a basement, my friend told me, there are thousands of unborn fetuses, deformed. And so you'll see a lot of Jizos around Hiroshima. Hey.
Thank you so much.
The shadows, what are the shadows on? Are they grass, on cement, on asphalt?
Usually embedded in cement.
Cement.
Yeah. And so that's the shadow from the Jizo was just around the base.
Because it detonated just above
the heat.
it. So.
Yeah.
So why the color red? So the color red was affiliated with deities who would fight plague, would fight due to quelling of demons. And so the color red very quickly became affiliated with protection from all of these different elements. Now, you see these cute images of Jizo. And those are specifically for children. There's this, it's a heartbreaking story it's all about Sai no Kawara, the river Sai. And basically the story goes, when a child is stillborn, or when a child passes away before their parents have, yeah, exactly. aborted or something like that. I wanted to be careful of how I said the words. These children, they haven't had a chance, they're considered pure souls, but because they haven't had a chance to gain any karma, they still need to be judged by the judges of hell. And because they haven't accumulated enough good karma, and because they have caused their parents undue sorrow, they are sent to the banks of the riverside, Sino-Kuara. And there they suffer because they cause their parents stress. But what they end up doing is they try to build these towers out of stone to climb out of the hell that they are in. And as they do that, and as they make progress, a group of hell demons underneath the control of a hell hag come over and they beat these infants with sticks and kick down the stones so the infants aren't able to make their way out. Now Jizo, he goes down and he takes these children and he hides them in the sleeves of his robe or inside his robes or underneath, anywhere that he can put these children, he'll hide them in the robes and he will abscond with them back up to the realm of where they are more safe, sometimes directly to the Western paradise. And so there are a lot of little Jizo sculptures around the countryside. Sometimes you might even see on the very boundaries of a village, you might see a grouping of Jizo sculptures. And that's just to show that children do not pass this point, because if you do, there's danger on the other side. And so Jizo became a protector of children, a deity that was prayed to during childbirth. He was a deity of, he's a patron deity of firemen, people that themselves go into the hellfire to save lives. He is a patron deity of a lot of people who do these sort of things. So we're kind of going to do just a hop, skip, jump over in Pure Land Buddhism to Kannon Bosatsu. Kannon is arguably the most famous and most beloved of all of the bodhisattvas in Japanese art. Her imagery, and I say her. I know I said before that you can't really call them him or her, but Kannon is kind of a special exception. Kannon started in a male form as Avalokiteshvara in India. You can see the mustache, the strong torso, the well-built legs, well-built arms. Avalokiteshvara was very much a male deity. Now, as Avalokiteshvara entered China, there became to be a little bit of a androgyny to how the deities were depicted. They were more or less genderless. But because Avalokiteshvara was a bodhisattva of compassion, and compassion is stereotypically a feminine emotion, very, very slowly did Avalokiteshvara come to be depicted as the feminine deity, in the feminine form. And so this would be an earlier form of a Guanyin, the Chinese version of Avalokiteshvara. And then you also see, this is a masculine form in Japan of Kannon. And the reason you can say it's a masculine form is because of the lack of the breasts, the more rounded, strong-jawed face. But as you start to progress more into Zen painting, you start to see a more feminization of the deity. And you see more of a tendency to address Kannon or call Kannon by the pronoun her. Now, one of the more identifying features of Kannon is this little figure on the head. This little figure is Amida Amida Butsu, so Amida Buddha, who is the central deity of Pure Land Buddhism. Kanon belongs to a grouping of 3 deities called the Amida Triad. You have Amida Buddha, and then 2 Amida Buddhas left hand. So if we were looking, it would be to the right of the sculpture, but if you were standing as Amida himself, it would be at your left hand, would be Kanon Bosatsu, and at your right hand would be Seishi Bosatsu. Kanon Bosatsu, because of this close affiliation to Amida, wears a small image of Amida in her crown. There are 33 forms of Kanon, plus a bunch of other ones. So, for example, there is a type of Kanon called the Maria Kanon, and that is a depiction of Kanon in a Christian setting, affiliating Kanon or Avalokiteshvara with the Virgin Mary. But probably the most famous of the depictions of Avalokiteshvara, of Kanon, are these 6 esoteric forms. The first of these forms is Sho Kanon, which is the sacred Kanon. This is the true form of Kanon as she appears in the cosmos of the Buddhist world. And the Sho Kanon is identifiable by what she holds in her hand. She holds a lotus bud or a water jar. You can see here there is barely the suggestion of a Amida Buddha, or there might not even be an Amida at all, which makes it confusing for everybody. But for the most part, if you see an Amida in the crown, that would be a Kanon. The Sho Kanon actually ministers to the beings who are in hell, the hellish beings. So each of these 6 forms of Kanon, they minister to a certain level of the 6 realms of rebirth. So Sho Kanon, because it is the true form, because it is the most beautiful form, because it is the most sacred form, her role is to serve those who are in the deepest, most depraved depths of hell. The next form is Sanju Kanon, which is the 1,000-armed Kanon. And this one, you could probably spend a lot of time counting each individual arm. I don't think you'll find that any of these sculptures have exactly 1,000. Some might have 980, some might only have 500, some might even have 20 arms, and a mandala, a backdrop that just suggests hands. But the big thing to bear in mind is looking at the objects that they hold in their hands. So some of them might have a halberd, some of them have an axe. This axe is actually an esoteric Buddhist implement that you use during the rites, the rituals you do when you worship. You have the lasso over here. You have a lotus blossom over there. You have the wheel of the law up here. And on the head, you've got a depiction of Amida Butsu, and you've got a larger head on top that is also a representation of a Buddha head. Now, why does Kanon have 1,000 arms here? Well, there's a little bit of a funny story about that. Kanon was so obsessed with saving and showing compassion to the beings around the world. She was so obsessed with it that her head actually split apart. She was so obsessed, she was so distressed that she could not help everybody, that her head split apart into pieces. And so Amida, taking compassion on the stress that Kanon was going through, blessed Kanon so that she would have multiple heads. So out of those pieces of her head were formed the multiple heads that you see up here. There are either 11 heads there or 10 heads, because sometimes you would have the main head would be one, and then 11, and then 10 heads up here. Or you might have 1 head here, 11 heads up here, for a total of 12. So either you would see 11 or 12 heads on a kanon like this. Unfortunately, the kanon could see in all these directions, and she could see all this suffering, but she only had 2 arms. So she couldn't do much about it. And so once again, she prayed to Amida and beseeched Amida, said, please allow me to help these people rather than just watch them suffer. And so what Amida did then was gave her 1,000 arms with an eye in each hand, with which she could observe everything and individually help all of the beings in the realms that were suffering. And so Senju Kanon, her specific role is to help all the beings in all the realms, but specifically in the role of the 6 sacred, of the 6 special forms of Kanon. She deals mostly with the hungry ghosts. The next form is Bato Kanon, the horse-headed Kanon, and this is probably the only depiction of Kanon that is wrathful. Now, you might wonder, why is the only wrathful Kanon the one that has to deal with animals? And here I ask you, have you ever had to deal with animals yourself? Do you have pets of your own? If I've got 3 cats, and I can tell you that this is pretty much a default look on my face. So I think it's quite understandable that the Kanon that has to deal with animals around the clock has got this wrathful look on her face, because those animals just will not listen. Now, Bato Kanon, you can identify this wrathful deity by the headdress or clothing that references a horse. And here on top of the head, you can see a little horse up there. Another way that you can identify this figure is by looking at the hands. This is what is called the Bato-in mudra. And the Bato-in mudra is the horse-headed mudra. And that is a mudra that is specific to this deity. So if you see this sort of hand gesture, that is most likely suggestive of a Bato Kanon. Now, Bato Kanon is most interested in helping the souls of the stupid and serving animals, the animals that are in service to humans, those that don't have any sort of, they only act by instinct. And so also Bato Kanon is also often prayed to on behalf of horses and farmers who have cattle, and to protect these animals, to keep them from falling into danger.
There seems to be
Yes.
kind of a split
Right
in the
there.
middle of the fire.
What does it look like?
It looks like an eye.
It looks like an eye. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a third eye. Often a third eye is only represented by just a little bump or a little tuft of hair in the middle of the forehead. But sometimes when you look at a more wrathful depiction of a deity, you would see a third eye in the forehead. Actually, next month, we're talking about wrathful deities of the wisdom kings. And they're the ones that you were most likely to see an eye in the forehead. And this is a little bit, I guess, a foreshadowing. But Bato Kanon is also known as Fudō Myōō, or the wisdom king, the horse-headed wisdom king. So we will see a horse-headed deity next month as well, but in a different sort of aspect.
Does she have 3 heads?
Yes, yeah. So a lot of wrathful deities are actually depicted with multiple heads, fearsome heads. And I don't want to spoil too much for it. But yeah, there's often.
Extra arms too.
Yeah, extra arms. It makes them appear more menacing. It also shows the power that they possess, and it also shows the all-encompassing the all-encompassing reach of Buddhism in general.